Here we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Unlabeled Live. I'm Anand. I'm the co-founder and CEO of eDAO. eDAO is a very gentle barge or a ferry that transports brands and communities and fans across Web 2 and Web 3. basically a little circle even within the internet. So I'm very happy to host another edition of Unlabel. Unlabel is a program that's very close to our heart. In fact, the whole point of eDAO itself was to activate stuff like this, where we get to shoot the wind with artists and sort of bring them into the NFT space or into the Web3 space, because we believe that's what makes Web3 worth it. And the ideas that artists bring into the space not only gives validity and legitimacy to the space, it actually makes it worthwhile. I'm also a massive fan of, I'm a glutton for imposter syndrome, and that doesn't happen. The best setting for that is to start talking with artists or among them. So I enjoyed this a lot. Without further ado, super happy to to introduce two amazing artists to you, Jayesh Sachdev and Priyanka. We're also joined by Sanjana Shah of the Tao Art Gallery. So let's take it away. We usually do this in a sort of a random question answer session, but I must warn you three, I'm a nervous talker, so I tend to hog a lot of airtime. So please feel free to interrupt me if you have something to say, because what I say might sound fun, but it's very rarely interesting or intelligent. So please feel free to interrupt. I just want to open the floor to Priyanka and ask her about her first, when she first heard about the NFT space and what sort of prompted her to dip her toe inside.
I actually am a complete newbie to this. I did not know about it for a very, very long time. There was some talk you hear, around, and I'm an artist that essentially I work with a lot of 2D flat vector illustration. So for me, it was something that was completely different. I didn't know how to get into this space. I didn't know whether it was something for me or not. I was a bit intimidated, I guess, in a way, because there's so much of the unknown in this. And I think it was anyway, as a creative, you always are dabbling with a lot of the unknown, let's say, because you're pushing boundaries here and there. But this was it has had to do with technology, and that's not something that I have really been aware of, let's say. So when Jayesh actually came to me with this idea of getting into this space, collaborating on this, it was this is my very first foray into the NFT space. So maybe a couple of years ago is when I started hearing about it, but I'm very excited to honestly see where this goes.
I'm glad, because it took me close to 7 years to actually find my groove in the space. I mean, the first time I heard about crypto was in 2013, right? So for some people, it takes a really long time. And in one sense, my journey into crypto, on the one side, is like a series of missed opportunities, and on the other, it's also a perfect metaphor for what the crypto space has represented for the last decade or so, right? In the beginning, it was only open or accessible to people who were either super comfortable with financial instruments or were like coding wizards and stuff. And it is still the case. It is still intimidating at a tech level. I found my groove in the NFT space because the portal there is culture, essentially. Whether you're a gamer or you're an artist or some sort of a creative, there is some sort of an entry point to you from that perspective. And that's what I really enjoyed about it. What was it for you, Jayesh?
So, as an artist, I like to think of my work not restricted to a medium. Many times there are artists that say, oh, I paint, or I'm a sculptor, and I'm a digital artist. And, I don't like to confine myself to a medium. I paint, I do digital art, I do packaging design, I run a fashion label, I do furniture. So for me, art is about putting it on a medium. It is immaterial what that medium is. When I create something, whether it's a visual language, I want to see it on an application, right? So for me, the NFT space is just one more such application. The advantage of this, though, being that I get to continue to have royalties over here, which is not quite being quite the case with any conventional forms of art. When I make an artwork for a client, packaging design, whether he sells 1 million pieces of those wafers or bottles of whatever he sells, I don't make anything thereafter, right? Or whether I sell a work in a gallery. So I love the idea of having ownership of my work and, for perpetuity in a way, because that is my creation at the end of the day. That has in some way, been instrumental in somebody's, in many dimensions for that matter, right? So for me, it's been a very exciting space to be in, because it's a new medium, it's a new opportunity, it's a new story, and a completely new audience, which is more exciting. And through the medium of this, I now have the opportunity not be confined to my geography, even for that matter, right? So I love that it kind of opens up a lot more doors for us as artists. Yeah, it's not that I've been in this space for too long, but yeah, it's an exciting space for sure.
That's actually a great segue to Sanjana, because I won't mince words, right? When it comes to the NFT space, there's no love lost between that and the conventional art world, or the conventional idea of galleries, or people managing art or artists, right? Taking a cue from three of the things that Jayesh said, how do you think the idea of a gallery in the physical space has changed for you, like the way you're going about it? And the three things are: one, in the kind of audience; the second is in terms of the financial rails or royalties that go back to the artists; and third, in terms of the medium itself. The one word which was very evocative that Jayesh said is that it is immaterial what the medium is. In the NFT space, most of it is immaterial. So how does that translate into how you look at galleries, Sanjana?
No, so absolutely. I think I've come in here as a bit of an antagonist because I'm definitely on the side of the galleries. And I come from a very traditional gallery. We've been around for so many years that all we've known has been like fine art, physical paintings, all the traditional sort of ideas you'd have about art. And I think that the minute I took over and I sort of started exploring contemporary art, I realized that there is so much more. And as Jayesh rightly put it, there's no medium restriction anymore. And that involves digital art, any kind of sort of, art that's for the artist rather than for the perspective of just selling and for the institution. So I think that I've tried to work with my artists, or I've tried to sort of understand. So the audience, as you said, has definitely changed, because the people that I'm looking at now are the younger lot. 20s, 30s, they're investing in art, they're excited about it. There's this, but they're also sort of, they want to experiment. And I think that's where the changing landscape of Indian art is really happening right now. And I think that over time, NFT is definitely something that is the future. That's at least what I haven't yet dabbled in it enough to be like, that's what I'm, sort of aiming towards, but that's something I respect and I understand. And I also feel like sort of from a financial model also as a gallerist, see, I'm a gallerist, but I'm also a curator. So there are two sides to it, because as a curator, I really respect the space and I really respect the sort of authority it gives the artist. There's creative authority, there's financial authority. But as a gallerist, of course, I think it definitely will make people, gallerists, think about the way they're sort of, what are they giving to the artist? The artist's importance has increased for sure because of this space. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, obviously that's contrary to the gallery model of things, but I do feel like at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is put out good art, and you're trying to put out that sort of, the intent of the artist. And it's very crucial for that authority of the artist to be there in order to do that.
Amazing. That was a very decorous answer. Thank you. And I do realize I might have come off a bit strong there, but it is what it is, right? The NFT space. And this is one of the weaknesses of the space, that, whether it is the NFT space or, traditional or conventional art, if you might call it, is that the way they look at the NFT space is sort of binary, sort of exclusionist, right? It's either or. And I don't think that needs to be the case, because the more you understand how flexible the technology itself is, the underlying idea of what an NFT is or what it can be, there are many overlaps. And inevitably, I think there is going to be a sort of a point of convergence between the very physical and tangible aspect of galleries, and more importantly, the curatorial aspect of it, which I believe is completely missing from the NFT space. Because it's no accident that over 95% of NFT art is crap. And most of the artists, the collectors, everybody knows it. But what's happened is that the big NFT boom, I do take a fair bit of the blame for it, is that it has sort of propelled all of the conversation around a price tag, instead of deeper focus on the artist, which is ironic because the whole space was started off, or the wave itself was started by genuine artists trying to work out this medium. So eventually there is going to be a convergence, which I think we should talk about a few minutes later. What I want to get to now is this collaboration between Jayesh and Priyanka. Jayesh, I mean, what made you look at Priyanka's work and say, okay, this is a perfect time for a collaboration, or a perfect kind of collaboration? And tell me a little bit about your work as well.
So you see, traditionally, I dabble with multiple mediums. I paint as well. I'm a fine artist as well, and I do a lot of acrylic work. What I enjoy about NFT is that for a long time, digital art hasn't been given its respect or due that I believe it should have had a long time ago. People have this misconception that because it's created digitally, and that means by tools of a computer, it has less importance or lacks in credit that hand skill does. From the way I see it, it is only a tool. A paintbrush is as much a tool as a mouse is for me in this case. And even though somebody uses Adobe, whatever software you may use, it is still only an instrument, and that is not detrimental to your creativity. And I believe that having dabbled in the space of art for over a decade, I've come to realize that digital art was never given its respect. And I believe that and to some extent galleries are to blame for it. This is not an attack at anyone. But it just hasn't been the case. And I have been at both sides of this, because I do paint as well, and I also do digital art. So I've seen it happen. But now you see some phenomenal work that's out there, possibly at par or even better than a lot of fine art. And you can't discredit that. So, Priyanka's work is largely digital art, and I absolutely, I'm a huge fan of the style of minimal vector that she works with. She has a way of translating visual stories. I've been following her mythology works, for a long time, and seeing how she has taken something that's very traditional and very rooted, and converted into something very contemporary, and that's been something that I've been very attracted to. My work is very whimsical and surreal. And I couldn't think of anyone that could translate my concept or visual story that I had in mind than Priyanka. So when I reached out to her, it was a no-brainer for me to reach out with her. I do work with her a lot on a lot of projects. We've been working together for a very, very long time. So the important thing for me is also an understanding, which I share deeply with her in terms of how we work professionally. So when I reached out to her, I knew that we could come up with something very exciting, and which is which goes back to the whole digital art space. It's about me as an artist that dabbles with both mediums, and Priyanka, who's primarily a digital artist, putting that into the foray of just art and not bracketing it under digital art or just saying art period. I don't quite like that we have to label ourselves every time as what kind of artist you are, and why does our medium define us, right? We're artists, whether we create for children's book or whether you create for for whatever else. We're all artists. Our mediums are different, our tools are different, but so I see Priyanka as another artist whose medium is different from mine, and given the platform, I'm looking for an artist that can deliver for the platform, right? So that's how I reached out to her.
I think it's
Priyanka?
also about So I'm essentially trained as a textile designer, which is a very, obviously tactile medium. But I'm also an illustrator. And I think where Jayesh and I kind of align on our philosophies, let's say, is we both tell stories, essentially. That's the basis of it. We like telling stories. We like telling stories through visuals. So for us, like he said, the material doesn't matter. For me, I probably started out telling stories through fabric, which later, we tell stories through, let's say, packaging. We tell stories through the spaces we create. And I think for us, getting into the Web3 space together on this is just a different medium for us to tell another story. It's a different medium for us to take our art into. And like he said, reach a whole different audience. Because that's essentially, I think, what we want also as artists, where we just want to take our work to as many people as possible, as many people across geographies, across different ages. It shouldn't matter. We want to see how people respond to the work that we do. I personally work with Indian mythology a lot, and those are stories that in a completely different space I'd love to take, across the Web3 platform. So to see how people across the world, people from different cultural backgrounds, react to something like that, that is so intrinsically Indian. So it's just a different medium through which we would love to see where the stories we tell can reach.
Amazing. Sanjana, you had mentioned a little while ago that, a new generation of collectors are excited about collecting art, about contemporary art. Do they always know what they want, or what is it that you think excites them? How do you think, you're going to mix it up?
So to be really honest with you, I'd also like to respond to Jayesh on this, which is that, I have really sort of tried to get that out to the audience in terms of art that's different and explain. And one thing I keep facing is people are obsessed with like physical touch on a canvas in India. It's like, but if this person hasn't put in the effort to, do that skill, how is this art? Why should I pay for it? So I've been faced with this question all the time. And obviously I'm talking about older collectors, veteran collectors. But I think the younger lot definitely are more open to it. I think they just want something. I think different is the word. I've different, pop, quirky, quirk box. But yeah, quirky is something I've heard so often. Like everybody just wants something that's, different, out of the box, something that can sort of really, see, in my opinion, all art for collectors at the end of the day is their own version of self-expression. I'm buying this piece of art because this says something about my taste. So it's actually, it's quite psychological. So a lot of them actually end up wanting stuff that sets them apart. And that's when like interesting stuff like NFTs will come into play, because it's different. It's, sort of challenging the norm. It's putting out something that's, everyone will be like, but what is this, right? And that's the intrigue that's being created. So I think the audiences are looking for intrigue. They're looking for difference. They're looking to set themselves apart. And they're excited by people that are sort of pushing the envelope, challenging our preconceived notions about what art is. So I think I 100% think this is a space that is flourishing and has a lot of potential to go forward.
Sanjana, correct me if I'm wrong, but I also feel like the veteran collectors also bought artists and not art, while the newer audience is more receptive to buying art and not artists. Why I say this is because,
I would disagree. Even
actually,
from
I disagree too.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just disagree on one aspect.
You disagree first, yeah.
But okay,
I'll just disagree on one aspect, which is
all
that
right.
Contemporary art is actually more about, like, compared to modern art and the masters, contemporary art is more about the mind of the artist. So that's why we see stuff in contemporary art that, you just can't make sense of, but you're so intrigued, like take Banksy, for example, or take anybody else that's doing bizarre stuff, but you're not actually caring about what you're purchasing as much as you're caring about why you're purchasing it. And that's because it's that artist and that philosophy and whatever they're sort of like trying to sell to you. So contemporary art is way more about the mind of the artist than it is about the skill of the artist. And that's why I will disagree. And I feel like, I mean, it's so the older collectors are more obsessed with this sort of like, oh, you know, Hussein is known to have done prolific work, and his every painting will be prolifically done in terms of skill and execution. But like nowadays people don't care that much. They're just like, okay, tell me the story behind this, tell me why they're creating this, what is their state. So suddenly the artist is the hero, and earlier the artist wasn't the hero. They just sort of became a hero because their skill had reached a level that everybody was like, wow, this is like praiseworthy. So I mean, that's what I have seen. But of course, you know,
Yeah.
Anand.
No, you're right. I mean, the bottom line is that what gives art value is context, essentially. I mean, the Mona Lisa is what it is because it got stolen sometime in between, right? And so even in the NFT space, people are able to buy art just for art's sake because it is priced so low. If it was not, if the price starts to increase and if it's billed really high, it is because they buy the artist and not the art. And both of these things boil down to context, right? And here's another sort of a slight detour, if I may, is that one thing which I think can evolve the traditional model or the conventional model of art, and also sort of step away from the NFT space, because again, NFT is not equal to digital all the time, and conventional is not equal to just a brick and mortar thing with old artists, right? Is the idea of scale, perhaps. I mean,
Sure.
the artist cause comes to mind, right? Right. So not only is he is he like firmly entrenched in fine art, but he does, AR apps for Choco Pops. Like he's got a collection of toys, like Jayesh has mentioned, right? It's multidisciplinary. He's out there everywhere. He's on Fortnite, for God's sake, and everywhere else, right? He has that chutzpah, that confidence to spread himself out without the risk of diluting what he stands for. Perhaps that is a direction, both the NFT space can take a leaf out of, and also the conventional space. What do you think?
I think Santana, that's addressed at you.
Sorry?
All of you, actually. Yeah.
So when I want to trace back to why Workbox started, right? The idea was essentially, I started talking to more and more people as an artist, trying to understand. In India, there is this large intimidation around art, right? And in one of the earlier talks, Sajid talks about art being elitist, right? So this is an observation that I had as well. Obviously, you go into gallery space, there's the intellectual, so to speak, right? And there was an exclusivity around this. But due to this, it wasn't democratic in a certain way. And a lot of people don't really end up being, let's say, the common folk don't end up visiting art galleries. And I wanted to find a way to change that. Like, so I addressed it by changing the medium. Instead of putting my artwork on a piece of wooden frame in a gallery and saying, hey, come watch this canvas put up on between four walls. What if I change my medium to fabric? I drape it on somebody and I say, hey, you walk around as my art gallery, right? So now my audience is literally a walking art gallery, and everywhere people wear that outfit, people are talking about the print, the artwork that I've created, not so much about a shirt, but so much about the print, which is my artwork. And they're like, and it's a conversation starter. So I feel like this is an exciting space wherein the medium is the boss here, right? We're taking it away from conventional spaces and letting people out there have an opportunity to discover completely new styles of work, be it, animation, be it, music, AI, VR, like there's a whole bunch of new avenues that have opened up as art, which wasn't previously conceived or, considered to be art. which I find to be really exciting. So I think the medium of the NFT or this whole, Web3 space, what makes it exciting is the new dimension it has thrown open right now.
No, absolutely. Also, I completely agree with Jayesh, because I feel like the arts is it's a very broad term.
Right.
We've really limited it with this fine art sort of idea of paintings on a wall. And I know a lot of people that are intimidated to go to galleries because they just feel like unless you're there to buy, there's no sort of, India just doesn't have, I guess, maybe what
The
Europe
culture.
has, which is that idea of going to a gallery or a museum just to sort of enjoy and experience art. That's obviously something that needs to change. And I acknowledge that as a gallerist, and that's something that I've sort of tried to work on. But, I completely agree with him that any kind of medium of expression is at the end of the day art, and that can, music, performing art, all of it, like it's just broad and has to be experienced and expressed in space. Galleries have to be open to that eventually.
I think it's also about multiple levels of experiencing something. I mean, it may go into some kind of an installation space, let's call it, but it's something that's just beyond the visual, I think, which is maybe now the concept of Workbox was that, where you're actually wearing the piece of art. And it brings multiple dimensions to the way you interact with this single piece of art, I guess. And it in a gallery space, I mean, I go to galleries everywhere. So I mean, it's probably mildly hypocritical of me, but I mean, that's an experience I thoroughly enjoy. But it also, I think, is that you're standing in front of the painting and it appeals to you in a certain way. You make your own conclusions about it, but there's still an other aspect, let's say. Maybe with this space, you get to experience this piece of art in multiple dimensions, which I think is exciting to explore.
So Priyanka, can you elaborate a bit on the multiple dimensions bit?
I think when we're talking about art now, where it's not just a painting on the wall, which also speaks to you in different ways. I agree with that. Now, when we're talking about whether it's a performance piece, whether it's music, whether it's an experience that you're creating as part of an NFT, I think there are multiple dimensions that can appeal to you on different sensory levels, is probably what I'm looking at.
Okay, so the one sort of thing that I've always felt, which I mean, I would be very happy for both of you coming from a space where you're doing NFTs to maybe challenge or sort of debate with me on, is that, sorry, Anand, am I taking away from your flow?
Not at all. Please,
Okay.
please.
So I just feel like maybe I'm a traditionalist, but I just feel like experiencing things in person, and this isn't just paintings on a wall, but as we were discussing, music, performance, any kind of sort of installation, it just has a different energy. It has a different so I don't really see works of art as anything else but what they invoke in me. That's just what I would invest in as a collector purely. So I feel like there's an energy that it invokes emotions in me, okay? And that's what sort of pushes me in that moment to buy or not buy. And I think that's super crucial because it's in person. The experience is in person. So how does digital art sort of, give you that without diluting from that experience?
I don't disagree with you at all about the in-person experience. It is not something you can substitute with digital. Which is why we go for live performance as opposed to just listening to it on our iPods, right? There is no substitute for a live experience of anything for that matter. But at the same time, this is an experience in itself. It is not up for me to say is it better or not, but it is an experience in itself, right? The fact that I could experience something created elsewhere in a way that an artist wants me to experience in this medium is an experience in itself. So I'm not sure what other artists that are on board and what kind of collaborations they're doing, but it could be an artist that is working with a musician to, to co-create something that may be an experience that you need to watch on a screen, which is what video art is about, right? And galleries are putting that up as well, right? Or you can watch installations in person that have movement, which can be experienced digitally. Or I have watched shows in a gallery space where I sat and watched, video, right? So this is a new medium and a new experience. It's a different experience than what we've been traditionally accustomed to, or been familiar with rather. But it's not to say that it isn't an experience that evokes emotion. It perhaps evokes a different kind of emotion. So just to address that, I feel like sure enough, it is not quite the same, but it's not to say that it's lesser.
No, absolutely. I think approaching it, as you rightly said, as a different experience altogether, rather than comparing it to the physical experience, is the way maybe to go forward.
And I am all for the visiting galleries. I love doing that. Every time I visit a new city, I want to do that. I do the gallery hop. It's on my to-do list always. If there are monuments, I would rather pick the galleries. Like it's something that I almost always do, or do both. But gallery hop is very high on my to-do list every time I visit a new space, because that is, like you said, the experience that an artwork evokes, especially in person, as opposed to viewing it on a screen. And as an artist myself, I am quite familiar with the impact my work has in person, as opposed to showing a photograph of it to somebody. And it doesn't always do justice, and I completely understand that. Many a times I feel it is an underwhelming experience to view this digitally.
But I think if it's created for a digital purpose,
yes,
I think that changes the game, right? That's when
precisely, which is what I feel the Web3 is about. It is created for this medium.
Yeah.
The experience is supposed to be virtual, and maybe virtual is the new real, right? So we're living in this dystopian society, so this is where we're going to find our utopia at some point.
Maybe not, right? I mean, here's the thing, right? Okay, last year alone, right? You know of this Van Gogh immersive experience? It's been doing the rounds in Dubai, New York, and
I went to that.
Yeah, I did. So in New York alone, last year it sold 2.5 million tickets at $50 a pop. Now it's Van Gogh. He's long gone. It wasn't a gallery, but it was immersive, and that experience was possible because it was digital, not because it was physical, in a sense, right? Plus, when we talk about what appeals to us, or what sort of emotion even a digital work of art can conjure. I mean, let's take the example of Beeple's 5,000 Everydays itself, right? So one of the main reasons it like really appealed to us is that it felt like a metaphor for a new generation of people in general, right? So here's this guy who's produced with an almost spiritual kind of consistency one work of art every day without fail for 13 years, right? So even without us looking at each and every piece, that was instantly, it drew us at a very visceral level, right? So it tells a story that you can start anywhere, but if you keep at it, you hit the end of the rainbow. Whether it's
and this is what I meant, by the way, mind of the artist. We're looking at the context. We're looking at him waking up every day and documenting.
The context is what finally turns the gears in the head, not necessarily just the physical experience or the visual one. Art ends up being a synesthetic experience at the end of the day. It evokes or sort of triggers multiple senses, and it's never an either or, right? Whether it's the NFT space or the metaverse as a whole, as we call it, it's never meant to be an alternative to physical experiences. It can only feed, at most 2 senses at a time. You're born with so much more, and you do need that connection, that physical connection. And in a sense, what the NFT space does, and I see we're at the top of the hour, so this is where I pontificate and bore you to death, is that it represents a massive opportunity for artists, in that for the first time, it gives you a viable alternative financial model, which has not existed for centuries, for eons, from the beginning of time, right? And two, like Jayesh was saying, that it opens you up to a whole new audience. It is instantly a global marketplace, an audience that is so varied and potentially varied. It's still a lot of tech bros out there. Is that, it is a global marketplace. And the third thing is that it enables these sort of collaborations, which is very hard to do in the physical world. And fourth, and most importantly to people like us, the regular folk, the collectors, is that for the longest time, art was something which is out of reach, essentially. Either you're made to feel like it's above your pay grade, or you're not culturally refined enough to be able to engage with it. But because of the proximity to the context, to the artists, to the narrative behind it, it becomes so much more accessible. It starts to become accessible at scale, which was not possible before. But in spite of all of this, in spite of all of the opportunities to the artists, I would still say the biggest opportunity is in front of galleries, in front of Sanjana, to be honest, right? Because they have the opportunity to completely flip the narrative, right, from before, because they have all of this history. They have all of the context. They know what it takes, because for generations together, they've looked at collectors, they've looked at artists, they see what ticks, what works, and how to contextualize a work of art, how to infuse that with narrative, which is completely missing. An artist, he or she doesn't need to burden themselves with putting forward that narrative on such a grand scale. They look at their work of art. Gallerists, on the other hand, can look at the bigger picture, can sort of bring the strain together. And so that's what excites me the most about the NFT space and this conversation.
No, absolutely. I think that is a responsibility that gallerists have. And I think I let artists do their thing in their studios, in their minds, because that's their creative safe space. And I don't sort of try to intrude. I think as a curator, I will say curator rather than gallerist, but I think your job is to take the essence of what they want to communicate and really put it out there in a way that can really connect with a larger audience. And if that's digitally, NFTs, all of it, I think that's great, because that's reaching out to a much larger and wider audience than we had the scale or scope for earlier. Especially given the sort of history of elitism, intimidation that gallerists in India have been associated with. So 100% agree with you on that is something that, as a gallerist, I'm trying to, and I will continue to imbibe.
Yeah, well, quite honestly, no one else can. So, continue for it. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Jayesh, I hope I passed the litmus test. You were a little trepidatious how I do. So
no,
I'm happy to have joined you. Yeah.
I bounced that question right back at you.
So this was a pleasure. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Please
you,
do join
Jayesh,
us.
Priyanka, so lovely meeting.
It was lovely meeting
All
you
the
guys.
best.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anand.
Thank you.